Hey, this is Shane,
And this is Keith.
and we are Seekers of the.
Unknown. Yo, 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 what's up, everybody?
Welcome back.
To the Seekers of the Unknown.
Yes, episode 5.
Wow, episode 5. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
All right, so we have some cool stuff to talk about this week. It's going to be about
Atlantis.
Atlantis. We kind of briefly talked about it in the last episode, and now we are going to kind of dive into it even more because Atlantis has been like kind of a legend, like a staple legend, just in the world.
Everybody has heard of Atlantis or has some story about it.
Yeah, even if you're like not even somebody who would listen to this podcast, just like any random person on the street, you can ask them about Atlantis, and they'd be like, "Yeah, that's like that mystical, city underwater.
It's made of gold."
Yeah, it's made of gold, and it's always associated with like being underwater or like water type of thing, and like pop culture and stuff like that, like Aquaman and Atlantis and stuff like that. So we're gonna talk about Atlantis, kind of like the origins and different, lots of different theories and stuff like that.
Definitely a different take than anything I ever would have thought of. For me, it's not something I really deep into. Probably more like everybody else, just your own interpretation of it. But after, diving into it a little bit and, the stuff you've told me, it definitely makes your mind run. Like, it's so crazy how it links so much of like the world together, and it's weird to even think about it
it's
that
like
way.
it's like a big piece of the puzzle of like all the weird mysteries of the world that kind of are just like individual puzzles. A lot of it's like Atlantis is like such a big essential core piece to it, I feel.
For sure. After what I've seen, I would definitely agree it's an important piece to the puzzle of life on Earth anyway.
So should we talk about kind of like the main background of like Atlantis and the origins of it, or kind of?
Yeah, I think starting there, it'll lead us down a couple different paths, and then we'll throw out our own theories in it and everything.
Ideas. So the main man of this story is a guy called Plato, who was like he was like a philosopher. Philosopher.
I would say, yeah.
Back in like the Roman or whatever time, Greek times. We're both not really too well versed in the whole like Greek Roman thing. I like Greek mythology a lot, or I did when I was younger, especially. So like I have an idea of like the different like gods and stuff like that. But in terms of like the history, the timeline, and stuff like that, I'm like not that well versed.
A long time ago.
Yeah, a long time ago, there was a man named Plato. He was a philosopher, and he spoke of through two of his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. I'm really bad at pronouncing these things. He talks about an ancient city that was ruled by a god or the gods, mainly Poseidon, founded by Poseidon, that were just really advanced in technology and military, just all around was just like a very prosperous, advanced culture that nobody really wanted to mess with. They were like very like dominant and hard to, I don't know.
Almost like, to me, like they would have been the capital of the world at that point, like the main place for, I guess, world affairs, if there would be any at that time. I mean, it's kind of the start of creation and where everything is.
It's very highly regarded as like the city or the country. What was it, city or country? I mean, depending on what origin you're reading into, it was a city or it was a continent. I would say continent. city. I don't know.
It was, yeah,
It was something. It was something.
an island.
It was something to marvel at, and it was obviously Atlantis, Atlantic Ocean. It was somewhere in Atlantic Ocean, probably in between where the U.S. is now and like Europe and Africa. Um, it says it was like west of the strait. What's it called? The Strait of Gibraltar, which is like between Europe and like Africa.
Yep.
I'm really bad at geography, but just think it's in a just think in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean kind of vibe. Um,
Because they say at that time, actually, the poles were shifted. They were 90 degrees from where they are now. So it kind of would have been, yeah, we kind of would have been on our side
yeah,
more.
yeah. So if you guys don't know what pole shifts are, a little science lesson. The magnetics of the Earth were not always like the same. I guess every certain 1,000 years, the magnetics will change, and the Earth will kind of like shift.
Yeah, almost like goes unbalanced and then balances itself back, but in a different orientation.
Yeah, like you know how like in school you have like the globe that's just like on a thing you can kind of spin
Yep.
it. Like say like somebody like nudged it or something, and it starts to like roll a little bit and like until it gets stable again, and things are not where they were originally.
But
Voice cracked again. Here we go.
they say that it's happening more and more
Frequently.
frequently. I think the last one was what 13,000 years it took. It went like originally it was like 28,000 years. It was close to like the precession of the equinox and us going around the universe.
Yeah.
But now it's happening more and more and quicker and quicker.
It's kind of like that mathematical term of like I don't know the term because I'm like not the best at math, but like one times one is or one plus one is two, two plus two is four, 8, 16, like that. How it's like the numbers get bigger and bigger and bigger, but it's like the opposite of when it happens. You know what I mean?
Right.
Um, and I've been learning a lot of networking and stuff like that, so I should know this because it's like a common thing with uh, IP addresses and stuff. Like I'm not gonna venture too far off, but in conclusion, yeah, like the pole shifts are happening a lot sooner. The longer we go in time, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like the gap used to be like enormous, and then each time it happens, the gap closes in like half the distance more and more. Like it was like 20, it was like 13,000 years ago, and then before that, it was 26,000 years
Yep.
ago or something.
So so what
Word on
should
the street
happen?
is going to happen
It's gonna happen
soon.
soon.
Maybe in our lifetime, and it could be pretty catastrophic.
Yeah, I mean, supposedly when that happened, Atlantis went underwater.
Yeah, or I'm not going to get too deep into this right now, but some say like Lemuria, which was another like ancient continent, was before Atlantis, and when Lemuria sank, Atlantis rose. That's open to interpretation, just like much of this episode. But yeah, when the poles shift, it's like all kind of major
Yeah.
disasters happen, and places sink and places rise, and that's how Atlantis came to be, maybe, or maybe Poseidon was just like, well, Poseidon was the god of the sea, among other things, brother of Zeus. I know that much, and he had control over the waters, so it could be like Poseidon was just like, oh, I'm gonna create this place through like manipulation of like water and
Yep.
stuff like that, like rising the lands and sinking different lands and stuff like that. If it's if Poseidon really could do that, or maybe it's more of a like comparison or what's it called, like metaphor or something, and who knows. But anyway, it's Poseidon. Poseidon's the main guy. Created Atlantis. It was like I don't know how many years ago. Um, but what's the story about Atlantis? They like got too advanced and too cocky and too like
Yeah.
wicked.
They talk about, well, the tree of life and the 12 points.
Oh yeah. So we watched a couple videos. I'm a big fan of this series called Spirit Science on YouTube. It kind of sparked a lot of my interest. I know in previous episodes I mentioned the hip hop group Jedi Mind Tricks. They were partly, my entry point into this like super fascination. And I discovered this YouTube channel where they have like a whole origin story of Atlantis. That's kind of, I'm just gonna say when you watch it, just watch it with an open mind. Don't really like just take everything to heart. It's kind of out there, but they just drop so many different things at you at once. They talk about like sacred geometry and the flower of life and Martians and pole shifts and uh, consciousness shifts
Yeah,
and interdimensions and all of that kind of stuff, which is all stuff that I'm into and you're into. So it's like maybe you guys are into, but
definitely give it a watch if you're, if you have time and want to watch it. I watched it for the first time, and at the beginning, I kind of felt like I was tracking one way, and then, like you said, they just throw stuff out there, and then you're thinking about like, well, maybe it went this way, and
and they have separate videos on the subject. So like you're gonna be like, oh, the tree of life, what is that? You're gonna look into that. Sacred geometry is really cool. We should definitely touch that soon. But according to that origin, the tree of life was kind of the basis of how Atlantis like kind of formed their civilization. Because there was like a select group of very intellectual beings, Atlanteans called the Nakal, and
they were like the leaders. They
they,
were like the
yeah, the spiritual
elite of
leaders,
the elite.
and they, you know, the flower of life was kind of formed on Atlantis, and each it's hard to say if you don't know what that is, but if you just like Google the flower of life, you'll see like a pattern. You'll see a bunch of circles, and I think there's like 10 circles, and each circle is like spews life in that particular like point of it. And Atlantis formed a lot of their cities in these.
And it was like those circles were like energy spots, and it
Yeah, like
attracted certain species to those certain areas, and it's kind of like
yeah,
almost how they like, to me, how I interpreted it, as it categorized, the people or the creatures or whatever it may be into those different civilizations.
yeah. So it's like they say, like in that video, they say that at the time the Atlanteans weren't that they were pretty spiritually inept, or what is it? Inept is that's a negative word or a good word? Adept, whatever. They were
You
very
know what we're talking
they were
about.
very spiritual beings, but not to the point where they could fully utilize all 10 of the tree of life
They were
energy
mainly
vortex.
right brained.
Yes, right brain, which is very like emotional and spiritual and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And so eight of these um, pretty much life spewing points of Atlantis were being occupied, but not they couldn't activate the remaining two. So I mean, whether they were activated, but
There was nobody to
there
like
was
fill it.
nobody to fill it. Maybe they weren't aware of the location for whatever reason. So it's kind of like something needed to occupy that space. I think the analogy was if you're driving on a highway and you drift too far behind a car that's in front of you, somebody else would like fill in the
Fill in
spot.
that spot. Yep.
And this is where it gets kind of wild and kind of, listen with an open mind here. But they say that two species um, fulfill those spots. One of them was the Hebrews
The Hebrews who
from the
traveled back in time
yeah from the future.
from the future to fill one of those circles.
Yeah, because they didn't really, at a spiritual level, graduate to the next level. They had some things they still needed to learn, so they went back in time to like
Essentially,
to learn it, I guess. Uh, so that part I tried to research a lot, and I got absolutely nothing about Hebrews being from the future or inter.
anybody that's listening that has anything you want to kick towards us,
I know my friend Nick, aka Snackman, who sometimes listens to this, is Jewish. So If you have any insight about your ancestors being from, the future, let me know. And so one of them was the Hebrews, and then the second one were the
The
Martians.
Martians.
So that goes into a whole different subject matter. But basically, Martians, we were talked about right brained, which is like very like spiritual and like
Yep.
emotion based. The Martians were very left brained, which is very like masculine and like,
Power, just power
yeah,
driven.
power, reason, stuff like, the opposite of like emotion, like more serious and stern. And back in Mars, they like try to like experiment in different ways with consciousness, and it just didn't work out because they were just too not in tune with the spiritual side. And essentially, they like destroyed Mars. Like,
Which is crazy to think it goes back. So here's where it threw me, I guess, for the first loop is right now in the world, if you think about like space news and stuff, Mars is our focus. We're trying to prove there is life on Mars. We found frozen water up there. We're starting to find, there is magnetism on Mars, so
yeah,
that proves that there had to have been
at some
some
point,
something there at some point. And to think that at this point, what you're getting to is like, if Mars was like Earth, the Martians did something. They tried to,
went to war themselves, and they
yeah,
just kind of
and
like how we are now on
how
the Earth.
we could possibly end up doing. They ended up destroying our world, and they left to find another place to live.
Well, what remained of them, they saw that spewing, energy
Right.
spewing from like Atlantis, and they're like, all right, we're gonna go there. So word on the street is they go there and they immediately just try to take over, obviously because they're very, you know, left brained, and there's not many of them compared to everyone else, so they didn't really succeed, even though they had a lot of the futuristic technology and advanced technology that you think of when you think of Atlantis.
So, do you think before the Martians got there that this, how we think of Atlantis is like this amazing city of gold and all this, technology. Do you think it was nothing before they got there and then they helped build
It
that side of Atlantis?
it's hard because there's two avenues. There's like the ancient, like like the Greek approach to it, where it's like Poseidon created it, but like no other Greek gods really had technology. So like, what made Poseidon, or maybe they
Right.
did. Why does Poseidon's island just immediately so advanced with technology and prosperous and stuff like that? Like no one else, had that. So it's like half of me is just like maybe not, but like with the spirit science avenue, it would be like the Atlanteans are just like very spiritual, kind of like almost like Buddhists, like people who are like very in tune with the spiritual side and nature and dimensions and meditation. And then, like you said, when the Martians came, or and introduced like, oh, this is technology, like look at this, it makes your life easier, like look, you don't have to work as hard, and they were just like, oh, okay, and then they adapted it. I think the me personally, I wanna believe the spirit science version, because it's just like, I don't know, it's more fantasy, to,
Right.
and it's like it's more along the lines of stuff that I am into or would like to believe. So I'll go with that. And I also have to say that, yeah, Plato says that Poseidon created Atlantis, but the spirit science says that like the main city in Atlantis was called Poseidon, and you know how the
Right.
Plato version says he bore 10 children. The spirit science version, whose sources are uh like a channeling, I guess, through like somebody channeled an ancient guy Thoth, who's like an Egyptian, or like he's many different people throughout history, but his teachings and his emerald tablets, that's a whole other rabbit hole. But they say like Poseidon was the main city, and then all of the other little cities, there was 10 other cities that came from Poseidon.
Right.
So it's like more of like a compare, like a metaphor.
and all of it combined made Atlantis.
Yeah, like Atlantis was like the entire continent, whereas Poseidon was like the spiritual center and the main city, the capital, so to speak. So it's I know I, I'm wondering if the people listening are just like, whoa, like where is this going? Just like it's I thought the same thing when I watched the Spirit Science video. I've watched that video too, like in the last maybe like decade, so many times, maybe like 20, 25 times. It's just so interesting to me. It's cool. But on the Plato side of things, what it was it? He there was like Egyptians that so a lot of different cultures all have like stories of Atlantis. Not even just like Plato. It's just like Plato, Egyptians, a lot of like
I mean, the Aztecs talk about it, the Buddhists talk about it. I mean, I even got to the point where I found like the Hopi Indian tribe. They date back, they came from South America and they moved up into what's now the United States in 2000 BC. And even back then, they had stories of Atlantis. So even the Native American tribes, all these different places all over the world talk about the same exact place.
and they always talk about like a god that rules over it.
In like technology that was unlike anything anybody has ever seen.
I hate to take the easy extraterrestrial route with this, but it's just so easy for like an ancient civilization to depict like alien or extraterrestrials as gods because it's just they come from the skies, they have all this power, they do so much to help the civilization thrive. Like who wouldn't look at that as a god? Like seriously, like
Right.
if somebody came down and was just like, look at all this futuristic, like things I'm teaching you and all these crazy magic. Well, I mean, obviously science wasn't such a prominent thing as now. Like we in 2022, we all see things with like reason and science, but back then, like you know, putting baking soda and vinegar like to cause a reaction, like back then, that's magic.
Right. Think about even stuff that we think is outdated technology, say like, the first computer or whatever. If you took that and you brought it back then, they would think you were,
You're a god.
a god, you had magic. And it's something that to us is nothing crazy, but you take that far back
Yeah.
and
So it's like all these civilizations that have like some kind of collection of Atlantis or an ancient city that's pretty much super comparable to Atlantis. Like,
it's all the same story.
yeah, it's like the same story. And it's crazy. It's like the story is always whenever a civilization gets like too cocky or too like removed from like the spiritual side of things. Like in the Bible, there's like Sodom and Gomorrah when the city becomes like wicked.
Yup.
Um, like God sends a catastrophe to wipe it out, and there's always like an earthquake or a flood. Definitely floods that just wipe the clean slate.
I perfect example. The Middle East stories of Atlantis being in the desert, and same thing. They ended up, taking too much for themselves and using too much power and pretty much turning, evil or whatever they considered at the time. And then all of a sudden there was a giant sandstorm, and those cities got buried under sand, and now they're gone. So even there's another perfect example.
It's always a catastrophe.
Yeah,
Always. Like, is that coincidence? I mean, Mother Nature can be pretty unpredictable and pretty brutal, but it just seems too convenient that every time there's like a thriving civilization on the verge of, I don't know, whatever they're doing, something's just like, nope, see ya.
See ya.
And then it's like, how advanced were they? Because, maybe they could have stopped it or like escaped it. Maybe they have. who knows? Like it's like Atlantis was so long ago that there can be like descendants from Atlantis right here and now. According to the spirit science, what was it, like a meteor came and or was coming, and like the Martians wanted to stop it and blow it out the sky, but they're just like, no, it's supposed to happen, let it happen, and it did, and then like chunks of it like destroyed a lot of like the Martians, and they got pissed and was like, you know what, we're done with this, like cooperating, and it gets kind of crazy again with like the sacred geometry and like the Merkaba, which is you guys might know more as like the Star of David kind of tetrahedron imagery, which is a big symbol in Hebrew culture. It's like, oh, maybe that's if they came from the future and are like know a lot about sacred geometry. That I wonder if that's like tied.
And I believe, don't quote me, I swear that the way their symbol is has to do with like 30 degrees,
Mm-hmm.
and you know you multiply 30 degrees and it'll make a complete circle, and everything is lined up like the nowadays even like the pyramids are aligned at 30 degrees to like some of the uh, uh, star different stars and different planets and stuff, and it's crazy how it's
It's very
all,
precise.
yeah, very very.
And according to the sphere science, it's they're doing it to create a synthetic Merkaba. Like a Merkaba, it's like an energy kind of vehicle that we all have the ability to create within ourselves, and we use it to travel interdimensionally. And it's like really, like it's really associated with like meditation. Once we get into that,
Just like a huge thing of power that we can manifest.
yeah, because of the Martians are so left-brained and so removed from spirituality, which like if they were more spiritual, they could like create their, you create your own Merkaba kind of like personal one. They're trying to create a synthetic one through this like complex pyramid energy alignment kind of thing. And they got it wrong. And if you get something like that wrong, it causes a bunch of catastrophic events
Events
because you're like messing with the natural energies of like
in
the
the magnetic shift.
magnetic
Yeah,
shift. They apparently they like cut tears into like the whole dimensional spectrum, and a lot of like lower level dimensional entities like seeped into ours and just caused a bunch of like chaos, and that kind of led to like the fall.
yeah, because when the Martians came, the um, Atlanteans, that's what I'll call them. The Atlanteans were, they were right brained, and the Martians were left brained. And then at first they clashed, but then they started to like live amongst each other. And
Yeah, and the Martians were just like, oh, maybe we will learn some more emotion.
right, so they were trying, they were teaching the technology and trying to get, you know, the Atlanteans used the left side of their brain and vice versa. But by them doing that, they stepped down in consciousness, so they couldn't predict like natural disasters and stuff. At one point, they were at such a spiritual level that they were able to see all this stuff.
Yeah, you're like in tune with like it gets weird with like time where like the past, the present, and the future, you can kind of see all of it, and like maybe through dreams or meditations and visions, and you're like you can kind of predict things and act accordingly. And they like lost because they fell in consciousness. They like lost the ability to like really see like future events or
Right.
like possible future events and act on them.
And then that's when the Martians kind of got mad because they didn't know that the asteroid was coming until they saw it, and then, like you had mentioned, the Martians wanted to destroy it, and they're like, "No, just let it happen." And that's when it hit and wiped out the Martians.
Yeah, and they're just like, oh, okay, we're gonna play that game, huh? You guys did that on purpose. Think we didn't know that. So, um, the Spirit Science video kind of, I don't like. There's a part one and part two we were watching. It was like to be continued. I kind of forgot how it ended. I think there's like a combined video. Let's call it the human history video because it talks about other things like the Anunnaki and all of that too. Um, in the beginning, like creation of man, like which will be another good episode to talk about. But it's like a whole combined thing, and I don't remember exactly how their version of Atlantis like actually went down. I don't know if it was just like probably a flood, um, or even like the Plato's version. It's like yeah, they grew too wicked, and they were punished by the gods or punished by whoever, and a great flood swept over. Which is like weird because if Poseidon is the ruler, it would probably have to be him to do it because he's like if he's not gonna let a flood take over a city when his ability is to control
And
water
it's his
and in
city.
his city, he would be able to just be like, no, you know.
Unless there's more to this battle with the Martians, and he tried to wipe them out by doing it, and just
Yeah,
figured he would take everybody out.
yeah. The spirit science is like the Martians, and then the Plato's version is like it wasn't like Athens that like destroyed Atlantis. I don't know, or they went to war with like Athens because Plato's like compared Athens a lot to Atlantis, and some people say that he was just kind of trying to get his point across, so he like not made it up, but like kind of manipulated the story to like better fit his
Right.
lessons and like his points. So obviously it's kind of hard to tell. Like we don't know. There's no like absolute evidence to any of this. But I feel like the more technology we have in terms of like exploring our oceans and finding cities underwater, I think in one of the videos I watched they said there's like 200 cities they plus cities underwater that they discovered right now. So like
And they even in the deserts they are finding
yeah.
these. So I
So remember when we talked about Antarctica and how that could possibly be Atlantis? Maybe when the pole shift happened.
so if the pole shift happened, think about that though. If the pole shift happened, so Antarctica being at the South Pole, if the shift happened
And it
now
was like 90 degrees or something.
and it was 90 degrees, it would be like at the equator.
Yeah, which would
So
be
it
like
would have been livable land.
yeah, yep. So it's definitely possible. I got to look more into this pole shift thing. Um, I'm not the most mathematically, scientifically, you know, guy. Well, I like that stuff, but I'm not like I don't know all the facts and like the formulas and stuff like that. But I would like to look into like pole shifts and see how like the science of today, how they view it and how accurate it is, or they think it is, or they say it is, because it would be interesting to know like how many years ago it happened and like where certain cities were or continents were. And I know there's like the theory that all the continents were together. Like when was that? And then
Right.
you know it's it's all very interesting stuff.
And it's, they say you can't beat science, I guess. Science is science. Once it's proven, it's proven. But when you add that side of it into, what we're talking about, sometimes it makes more sense adding the science side of things into it.
Oh yeah, I think that like magic, quote quote magic, and mysticism and stuff is all just like science that like we just don't understand yet. Like science can work on a different level than we realize. You know,
You know,
if I had a lighter back in the day and I did that, people thought like, oh, he's creating fire.
even if you had a match, imagine if you just swiped a match
You know,
back then.
yeah, it's magic. So yeah, those are the two sides of the coin for this episode for Atlantis. There's like the Plato, which is the most mainstream, mainline um, background of Atlantis, as told by Plato. Plato's is it Plato or Plato's? Plato's with an S. Not to be confused with Plato's Closet. If you want to go by your teenage um, daughter's some real hip clothing. You go to Plato's Closet, you might find some good stuff. But maybe Plato's Closet was named after Plato in hopes that one day. I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm trying to tie Plato's Closet to Atlantis. It's not really working.
Maybe that's where Plato came from.
Yeah.
The Play-Doh.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Plato. You know, it came from the composition of soil they found in the Atlantic, possible Atlantis buried city,
The Red Rock.
the Red Rock, and they evaluated or dissected the rock, whatever the term is called, and they found some cool minerals, and they're like, oh wow, this is kind of like doughy. Kind of want to play with it. Play-Doh.
Play-Doh.
Here I go being random again. So yeah, Atlantis. What do you think? Which side of that coin do you believe
For
the
me,
most?
it's for me. It's tough because
I want to link the two together.
yeah, maybe we can do a part two and get into it more if people want to hear more about it. So for me, getting into this, if you, I don't know, a year ago, say, hey, Atlantis, I would have thought, like Greek gods and like Roman empires and like
Yeah,
just a city of wealth and all of that. And it never would have crossed my mind that that would have been linked to possibly the beginning of life on Earth. And, because we're taught about Mesopotamia
hmm
and that side of it. But
there's like a lot of other ancient continents too. There's like Lemuria, like we were saying,
yeah,
and then like Mu, which is like another one, which is like the whole like Sumerian thing and Gilgamesh, and it gets it gets very all over the place. It's like it's hard because we're only talking about Atlantis, but like I just want to like go into like a side rant about like
it's very hard to stay on just the topic because, like you said, yeah, you can get down so many different paths and rabbit holes. And
because it's like you said, like it's very like when you think Atlantis, you think like just like an ancient prosperous city that was just like that sank under the waves, um, that was around during like during that time. But it's like all of these different civilizations depict it, but they all have their own set of like gods that all do different things. But sometimes those gods kind of cross over from culture to culture. That like the gods do the same thing and they have different names, but I don't know. It kind of like it leads to like one after another. Because I want to believe that part of it, like the Plato's version, too. But it's like then you would have to believe like, oh yeah, Zeus was a thing and Poseidon was a thing. But then what about this civilization's gods? Were gods just like rulers of their own territories all over the world, and they're all like part of like a grand like race or collective. You know what I mean?
yeah, like the leaders.
Yeah.
But I even in looking up some of this stuff, I saw where they referenced Poseidon as an alien, as an ET that came here.
hmm Yeah, I mean, like we were saying earlier, that could be a very well be a thing. Somebody so advanced in technology and knowledge comes here to like like a lesser species. They revere them as gods. They come from the skies. That's already like that, like heavens or whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
And that even talking about that, it opens my mind to thinking about this whole left brain, right brain thing and learning the technology and the talks about how at one point we were close with those gods, and which would kind of make sense with the rings of Atlantis with Poseidon being in the middle, and that
Oh yeah,
being
we didn't talk about that.
like no, we didn't. That being like the epicenter of like the most power, and if at one point say maybe that was heaven and we had that connection and then we got in that fight and they split from us, being the ETs or the gods or however you want to look at it, and then us kind of being stuck where we were with no technology advances and, you know, losing, having less consciousness and stuff like that. It kind of all ties in without, like you said, ending up down a different rabbit hole. Kind of all ties into itself. So that being another topic we want to touch on.
Yeah, maybe Poseidon was just like, "Oh, I'm done with this." Like, you guys kind of went off the deep end, pun intended. So I'm gonna leave, and maybe I'll just base my operation somewhere else, away from you, and I'll just sink you in the meantime as well. Just for added, pleasure. See ya. Since gods just like to do mean things sometimes,
I
which is
mean,
another thing that's like
we
so weird.
we
But
have a weird history of battling people and killing people and trying to take over everything. So it had to have started somewhere. So if that was the first battle,
hmm so remember how before I like referenced like some anime where I said like they like summon different heroes of history like Gilgamesh or Alexander the Great and stuff. There's a version of that anime because there's like different spin-offs kind of that are all tied in the same universe, and one of them depicts like the old land, like where all the gods like all kind of like live together. Like they all like just kind of like knew each other and like lived together, and they were like they walked with man more, like kind of like how you
right?
said, and they ended up
We walked among the gods
yeah,
at
we
one
walked
point.
among the gods, and then all of a sudden they just all were just like, all right, see ya, type of thing. That made me think of that. I forgot exactly the name of that anime. It's a fate or fate whatever. You can find it if you just fate if you like Google like fate and then two forward slashes. It's one of them, but it was just like all the different cultures gods were like pretty much together. Quetzalcoatl or however you pronounce that, the Native American one, or the um forgot whose god that was. Quetzalcoatl. You know what I'm talking about? That begins with a Q. It's like very like with a Z, and I don't know. And then there was uh like Gilgamesh was there, and then uh, some other cultures had like a jaguar god, and he was there. Like all these different mix of gods, and that was like interesting to me. I don't think Poseidon was there. He thought Atlantis was too cool, so he's like, "Yeah, I don't need to be with y'all. I got Atlantis. I got my little territory, my playground. You guys stay there." But yeah, with Atlantis, it just at least the Greek or the Plato's spin on it. It just is weird that they were so advanced in technology and like no other gods like did like cared or like had their own versions of their own cities that are like that too.
Right.
Like why randomly Poseidon? Maybe that's something I can dig a little deeper into. But like I said earlier, like in the beginning, Poseidon was my favorite Greek god. I always thought it was cool with the trident and the water, and
Yup.
I know a lot of like like comic book stuff with like the trident and like Aquaman type stuff was like I feel like was taken from the myth of Atlantis and maybe like Greek Poseidon culture and stuff like that. Um, so yeah, I think that's all I got that I can think of right now. It's funny. I'm gonna like drive home from here and be like, "Oh man, I meant to talk about this or that," but you know,
It's tough to stay on topic and just keep filling it with
because it
facts like we've talked about. We're just into it and we're fascinated by it, but we don't know everything. So it's
We
kind of
don't.
just like, I guess we take what we see and just
We roll with it.
yeah,
We just watch a bunch of stuff and we basically pick a subject that's like really cool to us, and we talk about it. This episode really makes me want to like talk about the flower of life and the tree of life and all like the formulas of life. It gets because that's pretty wild, and it's very relevant to like Atlantis on the spirit science version of it that I was referencing. Uh, so if you get bored, just Google tree of life. Maybe we can do a sacred geometry episode soon.
absolutely. Dave, if you're listening to this, I know you're into sacred geometry. Maybe we can get you on the podcast and we can all talk about it.
Oh man,
Um,
that would be great. We should do that.
yeah, that goes anybody that listens to us. And as most of you saw, we started an Instagram last week, and we've had tons of followers and great, interaction on there.
Is it?
And
And that Instagram is?
Seekers of the Unknown.
Is there like a period between each
Yes,
letter?
it's Seekers period of period the period unknown on Instagram. Follow us. Um, I had one person reach out and send a couple things in a DM just
Oh yeah,
to
that's cool.
talk about. I don't want to throw the name or anything now, but
Mystery person one, mystery person A.
feel free. Anybody that has any stuff, anything like that they want to kick our way and discuss or talk about, more than welcome. We're open to anything.
Yeah, please send us your thoughts.
Thoughts, different takes on things. Um,
Maybe some things we may have missed in an episode that we're like, oh yeah, that's like, or like a perspective, or I don't know, anything.
yeah, absolutely. And um, we appreciate all the support and everybody's feedback. And anybody that has ideas or thinks, hey, if you guys, end up talking about this subject, I would love to be a part of it. Absolutely, just let us know. We're just in for a good time, and anybody that wants to join, more than welcome.
Oh yeah. Oh, there's one more thing I forgot to mention. I used to watch the show like Stargate SG-1 a lot.
Yep.
Stargates is a whole other thing to talk about, but it had to do with like ancient Egypt and its ties to humanity and all kinds of stuff. But later on, they had a spinoff called Stargate Atlantis, which would be relevant to this episode because obviously Atlantis. But I it's been so long since I watched that series, and I didn't dig deep into the Atlantis part of it. But I know it had talked about like Atlantis being an ancient civilization with like highly advanced technology, and they had their own Stargate, which is like a gateway algorithm to get to different other gateways to planets and
Yep.
stuff like that. Kind of like wormholes to get to different planets, where humans did back way, way, way back, and kind of planted our seed through the universe that way through the Stargates. So there was a spinoff series called Stargate Atlantis, and I kind of want to get back into it, so I might do that. So that's all I had to add. If anybody ever watched Stargate SG-1 back in the day, I think it's all on one of the streaming services. If you want to start a Stargate SG-1 watch club or something, let me know. I might be interested because I just want to get to the Atlantis part
Yep.
as well.
So we can do some digging, find what it's on. We'll post
Maybe
it
just
on
watch
our
it.
IG.
Maybe we should just watch one episode and like, I don't know, do a review on it or something.
We'll do an Instagram live, and we can all just watch the first episode.
Hopefully not get like attacked for copyright stuff.
Nah, I don't think so.
But that's it.
That's it.
Atlantis. Thank you all.
Atlantis. Yep.
Have a good day.